You can fix your child's maths problem by encouraging them to study Year 7 maths. The reason is most of what they're going to study in maths throughout secondary school depends on the foundation they built in Year 7. So even if your child is in Year 8, Year 9, Year 10, or even Year 11, please encourage them to revise Year 7 maths. Hello, welcome to Block 4. Place value, ordering integers and decimals. Lesson 5. I'll share my screen. So in your previous lesson, you learned how to place integers in the correct positions on a number line. In today's lesson, you're going to apply a little bit of that knowledge to round integers to the nearest power of 10. But before we start, I would like you to pause the video for 3 minutes and answer these retrieval practice questions. Assuming you've paused the video and you've worked hard on these questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Here you're asked to mark the appropriate position of 647 on each of the number lines. It will be easier to do that if you mark other numbers on the number line. So remember what we did in our previous lesson. So this will clearly be 645 because it is halfway between 640 and 650. This one will clearly halfway between 600 and 700 will clearly be 650. So you can see how we can mark 647. So again, if you want to go even further, subdivide this interval, you can say halfway between 645 and 650 will be 647 point something. So you can clearly see why that will be the correct position. And then this will be 647. And then the other question, you were asked to write the value of the powers of 10. All right. So I must say, if you do not remember this or you do not know how this works, 10 squared means 10 times 10. 10 cubed means 10 times 10 times 10. 10 to the power 4 means 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. I want you to really pay close attention, and then you know this will be 10 times 10 up to 5 places, and then so on and so forth. I want you to pay close attention to this because you're going to see it in our future lessons. It's a very important concept called indices. All right, so here are the answers. You can mark your work really quickly. Okay, let's move on. Just before we move on, have you noticed that the number of zeros corresponds to the power number? So here, 10 to the power 5, we have 5 zeros. Okay, just take note of that. Okay, if we have the number round 83 to the nearest 10, we can use a number line to help us. So we can draw a number line and we can put 80 and 90. But have you asked why we have done that? Well, the idea is we write the number closer to the nearest 10, which is 83. We write the number less than 83 to the nearest 10, which is 80. And then we write the number greater than 83 to the nearest 10, which is 90. Now, if we want to place 83 on the number line, we have to write halfway between 80 and 90, which is 85. Now, 83 will clearly be somewhere there. So 83 is closer to 80 than to 90. So in that sense, we can say 83 rounds to 80 to the nearest 10. Okay? And we use these squiggly lines to show approximate. That is approximately equal to 80 to the nearest 10. What about this one? If we want to write 683 to the nearest 10, we can use our number line to help us do this. So we draw a number line. Now, which number will be less to the nearest 10 than 683? Of course, it's 680. And which number will be greater than 683 to the nearest 10? The next one, the next 10 should be 690. What is halfway between 680 and 690? 685. Where could we possibly put 683? It has to be somewhere there. Now you would say, well, that's closer to 680. So 683 rounds to the nearest 10, it rounds to 680. All right, what about this one? If we want to round 1836 to the nearest 10, of course, we'll say, well, the number that is less than 1836 to the nearest 10 must be 1830. And the next one, nearest 10 higher than 1836, is 1840. Halfway between them is 1835. Now, the number 1836, you clearly see that it is closer to 1840. So we would say 1836 to the nearest 10 rounds to 1840. What about to the nearest 100? Again, we use the same approach. We'll say, well, what is the nearest 100 that is less than 1836? Of course, it's 1800. And what is the nearest 100 that is greater than 1836? Of course, you would say it's 1900. Now, what is halfway between 1800 and 1900? It's 1850. Where could we possibly place 1836? Of course, it's going to be below 1850. So we'll say, because 1836 is closer to 1800 than to 1900, we'll then say 1836 rounds to 1800. What about 1836 to the nearest 1000? Well, to do this, we'll say, okay, which 1000 is less than 1836? Which 1000 nearest 1000 is nearest and less than that? Of course, you say it's 1000, right? You put down your number line. And which is the nearest 1000 that is greater than 1836? Of course, you would say it's 2000. What is halfway between them? You say, well, it's 15. Okay, where would we put 1836? We say, well, it should be closer to 2000. So that number rounds to 2000. Well, having looked at those examples, is it possible that we could round numbers without using the number line? The number line is just there to help us. Once we understand how it works, we do not really need to use it. So if we're told to round these numbers to the nearest 100, have you noticed? I want you to take note of what will be happening to the digits, these digits 4, 4, 5, 5, and 5. Take note of what happens with the numbers. We can use number line to prove that this is correct, but take note of what happens. Okay, so if we use our number line to help us, for these numbers, we would see that they round like this. Okay. And that one, 248, will be 200. 200. That's way past that. 251 is way past 250. 252 is way past 250. So we'll say rounds is closer to 300. But the rule is if it's exactly halfway between, we just say it rounds to the next number higher up, so which is 300. Have you noticed the groups of numbers that has 4 in that digit, in that location? Now there is something I want you to take note of, because we can make a general rule about this. So remember, when we did our place value, that's the ones or units, that's the tens, and that's the hundreds. Okay. Now, when we round into the nearest hundred, have you noticed that these numbers, when we look at the tens column, if the number is a 4 or less, we just round the number to the nearest hundred, which is the 200. Can you see that? Then looking at the tens, we can generalize that when the number is 5 and above, the number is going to round to the nearest hundred higher up, which is 300. Let's look at another one. These ones, what do you think? I want to give you a hint and I want you to think about this. Now we're rounding each number to the nearest thousand. So if we do our place value, that's ones, that's tens, that's 100, and that's 1,000. Now, which one do you think we'll focus on? We want to round to the nearest thousand. Have a think. That's right. I'm sure you're thinking, well, we're going to be focusing in on the hundreds column. And remember our general rule that we just figured out here. When we group the numbers, you see that the fours will round to the nearest thousand, which is 7,000, right? The digits that are fours, okay? And then the digits that are 5 will round to the nearest thousand higher up. It's a very important concept in rounding numbers or rounding integers. We're talking about integers here. Okay, here is something for you to think about. If I have this number here, the number below has a missing digit. The number rounds to 2,000 to the nearest 1,000. The question is, what could the missing digit be? Now, remember the skill you just learned. If the number is going to be rounding to the nearest, it rounds to 2,000 to the nearest 1,000, and we're focusing on this digit, which is the 100, because we're rounding to the nearest 1,000, this one, then it has to be less than 5. Have you thought about that? It has to be less than 5. So our digits could be, yeah. So if we use our number line to help us, this is what we'll get. But based on, you see, we could have figured it out without using our number line. So our digits has to be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Because if it's up to 5, guess what? Or above, from what we learned previously, is going to round to the nearest 1,000 higher up, which is 3,000. Okay, I would like you to have a go at questions 1 to 5. So time to do some practice exercises. Here are questions 1 to 3. Pause the video for 5 minutes and answer these questions. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered these questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. The answer to question 1 here, you're asked to complete the sentences. 57 rounded to the nearest 10 is, okay, so by now, you do not even need a number line to do it anymore. Okay, I'll just use these to illustrate the first few ones. So we're rounding to the nearest 10. So we'll focus on the ones. You can see it's greater than 4. Yeah. 5 and above means that one will round to the nearest 10 higher up, which is 60. And then look at this one. We're rounding to the nearest 10. So we focus on the ones. Yeah, you can see that digit will now be the next 10 higher up, which is 1160. We're rounding for this one. We're rounding to the nearest 10. We focus on the ones, which means that will round to the nearest 10 higher up, which is 1190. It's a very important skill. Okay, let's move on. So make sure you mark your work and you celebrate your success. All right. Here are the answers for questions 2 and 3. For question 2, Mo is rounding 1,288 to the nearest 100. Again, using the same methods what we've been learning, you can see that he should have looked at the top column, right? And then remember the method we're using. If you're rounding to the nearest 1,000, okay, you look at the 100 column to see what digits you find there, whether it's less than 5, which is 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 and above, which will make the number round to the nearest tens or thousands or 100, depending on what you're rounding higher up. Okay, so here are the answers for these. Here are questions 4 and 5. Pause the video for 4 minutes and answer questions 4 and 5. Assuming you've paused the video and you've worked through question 4 and 5, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. The answer to question 4 is the number of people at a concert rounded to the nearest 100 is 15,600. How many people could have been at the concert? Yeah, this number of people. This can round to the nearest 100, and that can round to the nearest 100. Remember the skill we've used? You don't even need to use your number line anymore. All right, just to show that again, we're rounding to the nearest 100, so we can look at the tens. That one can round up. Okay, can make that one round up. This would not work. All right, because that will not give us 15,600. This will not work because this will round to 15,700. Okay, so it's these numbers. Yeah, these numbers. Okay, let's move on. And then here you ask, what is the greatest number of people that could have been there? Greatest number would be 15,649. Okay, because if we round this, we'll still get 15,600. All right. Okay, just to explain again, if we use the same technique we're using, we're rounding to the nearest 100. So it's going to be, we're going to be looking at that. We're rounding to the nearest 100, that one. So we focus on the tens. Okay, that could be 4, and then that could be 9. That's the highest we can go. If it's 650, then it's going to round to 15,700. Remember what we've learned so far. And here are the answers for question 5. Here you ask, Aisha rounds an integer. Her answer is 7,000. Aisha must have rounded her number to the nearest 1,000. Aisha could have rounded to the nearest 10, 100, or 1,000. Okay, who is correct? Okay, it's Mo, right? So it could have been, number of ways. So 7,001 can round to 7,000, yeah, to the nearest 10, 100, or 1,000. Okay. All right. Now, let's look at some problems where we have to do some thinking. So I am thinking of an integer x. So the we're told that 20,000 x is approximately 20,000 to the nearest 10,000. Well, that's good information. Next, we're told x is 16,000 to the nearest 1,000. And again, we're told x is 15,800 to the nearest 100. Which one is it? Which number are we going to be using to represent x that fulfills these conditions? Well, anytime you have a question like this, it's good that you use a method of looking at each condition step by step. So for the first one, we can say, well, the number could be between 15,000 and 24,099 because these numbers will round to 20,000. All right. Remember our method, the way we use, okay, if we're rounding to 20,000, okay, we look at this digit and we look at that. That's the highest we can get because that will round to 20,000. And that one would also round to 20,000. Now, when we narrow it down, we can say, well, that's too, the range is too much. We could have 15,500 and 16,499 if we round into the nearest 1,000. Okay. And then when we narrow it down again, we get this. So the number could be between this and that one. Okay. Now, here is another question to think about. So there are 100 students in year 7. Each student needs to be given one apple. 2 crates of apple are bought. The number of apples in each crate is rounded to the nearest 10 to get this. The question is, do we have enough apples to give one to each student in year 7? Well, we can look at different conditions of doing this. Remember how we round up or round down? The scale we've looked at, we're no longer using a number line. Number line was just there to help you understand the concept and to think about how it works. So if we use a number line, we have 50. Now, what are the numbers that could round? If we have exactly 50, that's great. It means we have enough to give to 100 students. But remember, we're told that it was rounded to the nearest 10. Now, think about the numbers that we could round to the nearest 10 that will give us 50. Okay? Could be these. Could be these. Yeah? But not that one. Because that will round to, guess what? 60. And then these ones. All right? Now, if you think about it, what do the number of apples in each crate have to be if we're rounding for us to be able to give 100 students? You can clearly see that we can have these combinations of each crate. That's great. That would be in an ideal world. Perfect. But we could have that. We still have enough. We still have not enough because here, yes, we can round it to 50, but the actual apples will be 90. And that would not work either. Okay. So these are the combinations that we could have to give the students apples, one each. Yeah. Okay. So here are the questions for you to answer. So what we've learned so far is you can use rounding of numbers. You can reason using the skill we've learned. And then you can use your problem solving skill to think about using those skills to answer questions regarding rounding. So here are the questions. Question 6. Pause the video and answer question 6 in 3 minutes. All right. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 6, here are the answers. Okay. So by now, rounding to the nearest 1,000, to the nearest 10,000, to the nearest 10, to the nearest 100 should be really easy. You don't need the number line anymore. You know the technique we learned, okay? And then here is question 7 and 8. You can pause the video and answer the questions in 4 minutes. All right, assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So these are the answers for question 7. You say, here are some digit cards. You've been asked, use all the digits to make a number that will round to 43,000. Of course, by now you should know how to make numbers that will round to 43,000. So you see, the 9 has to be there so that, you know, that will round to the nearest thousand higher up, which is 43,000. Yeah. And then here, okay. These are the answers to question 8. All right. And here is question 9. I would like you to pause the video and answer question 9 in 2 minutes. Okay, here is the answer to question 9. So the answer is no, right? Because if we add 5 each for the 5 boxes, we're going to have an extra 25, which obviously is greater than 225. All right. So that is the answer. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson. So what we've learned so far is applying your knowledge of knowing how to round. Number one, if you round into the nearest, 10, for example, you look at the ones column to check what digit is there. If the digit is 4 and less, you know that your nearest 10 is going to be the nearest 10 less than your actual number, okay, which is, which means it's going to stay the same in most cases. And then if you're rounding to let's say nearest 100, you're going to have to look at the tens column and then check whether you have a digit 5 and above or 4 and less to determine whether you round down or round up. Okay, so it's really important. You can watch the video again to see that skill we learned where you don't need to use your number line again. Okay, until next time, take care and bye-bye.